Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shavis Perik Ches Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Samach Beis. We left off on Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph in the beginning of the Gemara, 6 lines from the top of the Amud, and we're going to learn today the analysis of every single line of the Mishnah, beginning with the Mishnah tells us the items or the purposes for which you can use Peirei Shvis, and the Mishnah gave us the 3. That we can use it for eating, for drinking, and lasuch for anointing oneself. Drinking is tantamount to eating, and anointing is tantamount to drinking. Now, the Mishnah added a caveat, and that's something that has to be analyzed. The Mishnah says that, yeah, you can eat, but how? Loichal davar shedarkei loichal. You can eat what is customary to eat. And we will see, the Gemara is going to bring braises that will elaborate a bit more, from which it will become clear that these words in the Mishnah both teach us a stringency and a leniency, as we'll explain. And the same thing is with the next line, when the Mishnah speaks about lasuch, which would have been enough. No, the Mishnah says, lasuch, davar shedarkei lasuch. You can anoint yourself with what is customary for a person to anoint oneself with. Again, this implies both a chumrah and a kula. Now, when it comes to lasuch, we already read out the Rashi Ilyo, that when the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to anoint yourself with the yayin or chometz of shvi'is, because people only do that litafur. And we're going to have a large amount of today's daf focusing on this restriction. And we'll see it's not as restrictive as it appears. By the way, we have a very similar topic when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, that even though midarabanan, a person is not allowed to take medicine on Shabbos, if a person is drinking a certain item, right, a certain concoction, that even healthy people drink, even if the person is doing it, their intent is for medicinal purposes, we learned this in Hilchas Shabbos, you are allowed to take it, because you're having something that's not exclusively used for medicine. A very similar sugya will be today's sugya on Samach Beis and Shvius, that even though, again, we're not allowed to use Shvius l'refuah, but all these types of foods or drinks that were made for healthy people, even if the person's usage of it is l'refuah, it will be allowed, even though the item is an item of Shvius. Then we're going to learn another fascinating sugya. That first of all, the Braisa says that ein mefatmin shemen shel shvius, that if you have oil of the shvius here, you can't use that for perfume, which means you can't put the different herbs in it that will give their flavor and their taste and their smell and their scent. You can't do that. We'll see, because it's a lose-lose. Some of the oil gets absorbed in those herbs. And those herbs are thrown away afterwards, after all of its tam went into the oil. So since there is some loss of oil, plus there's another reason, that's why you cannot use shemen shel shvius for pitum, for perfume. The only question will be, and we'll see ultimately, it's a machlokes tanoim, will we say the same thing regarding wine? People also would put various herbs or spices in wine. If the wine is wine shel shvius, are those reasons applicable? We'll see it's a machlokes tanoim. And finally, we'll have a little shtickle story at the end of today's daf, already going into daf samach gimel on the top, and we're going to see a very unique application of the kedusha of shvius that we did not have up until now, vis-a-vis taking oil of shvius into a bathhouse. And we'll see that in the innermost room, it's asur. Why? Because the oil is kadosh. And that kedusha also expresses itself with us not being allowed to take it in a place where, for example, people are not allowed to make brachas. Okay, Chevra, Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph. So after the Mishnah said, the beginning of the Gemara, that you could use Shvius product, eating, drinking, and anointing, the Mishnah, for the eating, and then for the anointing, the Mishnah said by the eating that loichal davar shedarkei loichal. That's the words of the Mishnah. So the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean? This is implying a stringency? Is this implying a leniency? And the Gemara says it's really both. So number one, ein mechayvin oisei loichal Loichal davar shedarke loichal means that one might have thought that since it's a product of shvius that has kedusha, you're chayiv to consume it. Not eating it and thus throwing it out, or even if not eating it and now that it's not edible for human beings, now using it for animal fodder is a waste, is a hefset. We don't go that far. Meaning, we don't obligate the person to eat a product of shvius if, for example, loy pas ipsha, what happens if bread became moldy? Or what happens if you have kenuvas yarak, if you have the edges of the leaves of vegetables of shvius product, what happens if it becomes brown? Many people would trim it off. So it's ruined. Or or if you have a cooked food that now became spoiled. In other words, it's amazing that you see over here that there would be a havamina that you're chayiv to eat it up. It's spoiled, but there's kedusha in it. I can say like this. I grew up, my mother had a term called mitzvah bananas. That's when the bananas were so brown that it's barely edible, but because these are all people that survived the war in Russia, now in Nishnah, it's not only good, now it's great. Now it's called a mitzvah banana. This kind of notes, you would think that's by stam food. Imagine by holy food that you're chayiv to eat it. So that's number one. Look inside the Marafulda. I know this is back in the Mishnah. It doesn't matter. The Marafulda brings this already down in the Mishnah. Third line from the top. Lechol davar shedarke lechol. In other words, even though the Torah says la'achla, and one of the Chazal's limudim from la'achla is v'loy lahefsed. You're not allowed to ruin it. You can't let it go waste. Nevertheless, ein mechayven oisoy lechol davar she'ein derech b'nei adam lechol. It doesn't mean that now you have to eat it. For example, tafshul sheneskalkel. And we don't care if you're not going to eat it, what's going to happen? You're going to throw it away. That's what the Mishnah is saying. That's a leniency. Or now we're going to go to a stringency. What will be the chumrah? Who should be kesh? If a person desires to eat raw beets or raw wheat, we don't listen to him. I want you to know that it's amazing that since beets and wheat are items that are customarily eaten, processed, meaning cooked, or the wheat processed, made into flour, ultimately baked into bread or cooked into another type of oatmeal. The point is that eating something that's customarily not eaten raw, eating it raw, that's called a wasteful use. And it's amazing. You're not wasting it, Yakir, bekamus. If I care, when you cook it, it becomes smaller. You're wasting its echos. In other words, it could have been consumed in a better way, in a tastier way, in a more elevated way, and you're downgrading it. Even though you're not losing any of the quantity of it. In other words, it's a hefset of echus. Almost to argue that if you have two chefs and you have the product is of shvius, you have to give it to the chef that makes better food. Al derech, this concept. Of course, al tam vareich ein lehis vakeach. And there we're not saying that, just a concept. If you're having it raw or cooked, if something that everyone eats cooked, on the presumption that cooked is geschmacked, it's more elevated, that's gewaldig. I skipped one line. And now the Gemara says, same thing in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah said, now, and I just for the record, the girsa that we have in our Mishnah, when the Mishnah added, the beginning was shvius nitnu le'achilo she'ilasicha. Then the Mishnah added, when it comes to eating, loichal davar shedarke loichal. Then the Mishnah added, lasuch davar shedarke lasuch. Our Mishnah made no mention of drinking. Doesn't matter. But now the Gemara, who quoted the Braisa's expansion of the words of loichal davar shedarke loichal, the Braisa goes on, keitzad lishtois davar shedarke lishtois. The Braisa had that added one-liner. Now we have to explain that also when it comes to drinking. And just like when it came to eating, the vort is that it's both a implied kula and a implied chumrah. So when we have these words over here, lishtois davar shadarkei lishtois, same thing over here. It must mean both lekula and lechumrah. It doesn't must. It's consistent. So let's go see how that works. So ein mechayven oisen lishtois. We don't obligate a person to drink. Anigaroin. We had these drinks in brachas. Anigaroin is water in which beets were cooked. Iksagoirin is water in which vegetables were cooked. Both of them normally had olive oil mixed in it. That's the way it made it, let's say, better. So you might have thought, what happens if a person doesn't have the olive oil, the finishing touch? They have the beets that are the borscht water. They have the vegetable water. So again, one might have thought of Havamina, since there is kedusha in Shviz, you're not allowed to let it go waste. I don't have the olive oil, so I have it without olive oil. That's the word. It's a kula. We're not machayiv you to consume it if it's not in a way where people normally consume it. Similarly, here it's not that something is lacking. Here there's too much. V'lo yayin b'shmarav. Right? If you did not remove the sediment from the wine, again, one might have thought, since there's kedusha of shvius, you're chayiv to drink it all up. Drink it up, bottoms up. It's filled with sediments. There's kedusha. Loyla hefseid. We don't say that. That's the leniency. What's the stringency? That if a person has toothaches, and people to alleviate toothaches, then they would rinse their mouth teeth with vinegar. Don't sip vinegar. We're speaking about vinegar that came from wine, that came from shvius grapes. Don't do that. Because now, it is customary, lidafua, for people to sip vinegar and to swish it around their teeth. And to spit it out. But remember, that was the Mishnah that we just quoted again in the beginning, that when the Torah says to eat Peder Shviz, one of the limudim is Davar Hashava L'chol Nefesh. Even though these exact words we only have in the Bavli, we had similar words above a couple of daf ago. It means since refuah is only for the ill, not for the healthy, using Peder Shviz l'refuah is aser. So I have vinegar. Now, vinegar can be used many different ways. But if I am using it in a way that the darkoi of this usage is only l'choilim, I'm not allowed to do that. Which would be, for example, sipping vinegar and spitting it out. But if I'm using the same vinegar, avol migameohu umavliya, if I'm going to sip it, migameo means I'm sipping it. That means I'm allowing it for it to remain for a relatively longer amount of time around my teeth. That's only something that people do for medicinal purposes. But as long as I am swallowing it, even healthy people, to open up their appetite, b'chlal, opening up appetite, we find in Chazal that we have from wine. Wine opens up one's appetite. We have that also in Ksubas in the beginning, when they used to have 10 cups of wine for the Avelim, right? Remember, after the burial. But that's where we have that wine opens up the appetite. There is some of that connected to why b'chlal we begin every Su'udas mitzvah, Shabbos, Yom Tov with wine, aside of the Kiddush aspect that opens up the appetite. There's Sipuri Tzadikim of the Baal Shem Tov, who after fasting for 3 days, Erev Pesach, drink wine to open up his appetite, to have even more appetite when you do the mitzvah of eating matzah. The same thing is also with vinegar. So if a person has a toothache, that's the Chiddush. They are doing it to heal their tooth. But they're doing it b'derech, healthy people. So they're sipping it and they're drinking it. Or umetabel kol tzarchai, or if a person is dipping their food as a dip, that's fine. That's fine. People use vinegar for a dip. The chiddush here is that even though I am doing it for medicinal purpose, I have a toothache. As long as I am doing it in a way where it's darkoi lishtois, that's not called a degradation, a wastefulness of peiroi shvi'is. So that is the leniency. Similarly, if a person has a throat ache, lo ya'ar arenu b'shemen. Don't gargle with oil, which is something that is done purely, again, for medicinal purposes. But going back to this anigoiden, if you're adding a lot of oil, why am I adding a lot of oil? Because I have a throat ache, and I want for my throat to be oiled. But since I'm putting it in anigoiden, and anigoiden is done because even healthy people have anigoiden, even healthy people have anigoiden with a lot of olive oil. Anigoiden, as we just are all these types of vegetables, that beets that were soaked or borscht in water, and then they would have olive oil. So now we got, so this is the consistent concept over here, that as long as what you are doing is also done by healthy people, even though your kavana is l'refuah, it doesn't become asur based on the lo'achla v'lo lahefseid limud. And again, we have this similar concept when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos. When I'm doing something that is done by healthy people, when I'm eating foods that are eaten by healthy people, I can have chicken soup on Shabbos. That's a great example, even if when I'm not feeling well. And I know that chicken soup is going to alleviate my illness. I'm allowed to have it. Why? Because even healthy people have it. Mamash, the same concept. And now the third in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah gave us achila, shsiya, sicha. In the Braisa, we had also this added lishtois davar shadarka lishtois, and now we're going back to the Mishnah. Again, the Mishnah says sicha would have been enough, right? We said sicha kishasiya, but the Mishnah adds this caveat that what? That losuch davar shadarka losuch. What does that come to teach you? So it comes to exclude that lo yosuch yayin v'choymetz. You can use olive oil, but you may not use wine or vinegar. Wine and vinegar was exclusively used as a sicha l'choylem la'achla v'lo lahefseid avol sachu es hashemen. But you can use olive oil, and just like we learned before when it came to the drinking, that since any type of consumption which is also done by healthy people is allowed to be done by an individual who's doing it for medicinal purposes, same thing is going to come to sicha. So now that we established that you can anoint yourself with olive oil because healthy people would do so, what happens? A person who has a headache, a pain in your head, or there's a certain skin ailment, as sha'ololoi chatatim, you have scabs. In other words, you're putting oil on your head to take away your headache. You're putting oil on your head to alleviate or to heal these scabs. You are allowed to use it. Sach shemen. You can use shemen. We're speaking about shvi shemen. Why? Because healthy people do it. No one anoints themselves with yain and chaymetz unless they are ill. Can't do it. Shemen, people do it even when they're healthy. You can do it even when you're sick. Look, the last Panei Moshe before we turn to Amid. Achoshes esroishoy shelapa'amim oisim zel refuah ubishel shvius asur she'ein darkam lesicha. So it's v'nikar. He's speaking about the yayin. He's speaking about the chaymetz. It's not you're doing it, but it's not nikar. Okay. Daf samach beis amad beis, and now we begin. So here we're learning a rule. And even though we spoke about this before, we spoke about putting perfume on you. Now we're speaking about the making of the perfume, the manufacturing of perfume. When we say every morning, pitum haktoides, being mefateim ketoides, that was a procedure. I forgot what mesechta we learned it in, but it was very geschmack, how they would make the ketoides. So the first step is I mean, I'm not talking about by kachim. There was a tremendous amount of effort. They used to soak it in water to make sure that there was no loss of oil, if I'm not mistaken. I think by kachim, they would soak the herbs first in water. Then they would put it into oil. And why would they do that? Because water and oil don't mix. And when you make perfume in a normal manner, the taste, the scent of the herb goes into the oil, which is what you want. But some of the oil gets absorbed in those herbs. And once the scent is in the oil, you don't leave the herbs in it. When you buy a bottle of perfume, you don't find the herbs in it. So you're going to take it out and throw it out.
Maybe it's called infused.
Thank you, infused. Once the taste of the ingredients that are in the oil are fully infused in the oil, those ingredients are thrown out. And what's the problem? The problem is that since the shemen is of shvi'is, and some of the oil goes back into those herbs are going to go to waste. Now, there's another
He says
reason.
the alternative is that it's also ruining the oil.
There's another reason. And the other reason is let's go with that. And that is that oil, prior to it being perfumed, could be used for consumption. It could be used for fuel. Just because it has a good scent, it doesn't take away that function. But the eating function of oil, let's say less people will have the oil because there is the taste of the perfume in it.
Yeah, but we said you could use oil for lasach.
I know that. But
Right.
You are diminishing its usage. That's why not everyone goes with this understanding. It's like kamus and echos. In other words, I can use it for two purposes, three purposes. When you make it into perfume, you limited its use. So many people understand that that's also, there's a hefsid part of it. Others disagree with it. They say that, why? What are you talking about? You upgraded its use. The lasuch function, be'echos, becomes upgraded. Who cares if in the kamus I can't eat it? But one thing is for sure, that some of the oil will get absorbed in those herbs, and there is a hefsed in that oil. And the Braisa, there's no machlokes here. We'll learn the same idea by wine in a moment. But the rule is, however, now, however, even though you're not allowed to make it, now, what is the any to perfume, to make sure that the person who did it, is do that. You don't have to be that concerned. Okay, hold on. Now, so Rav Imi saw when he read the Braisa, that when the Braisa says loikeyachu, it means afilu min achashut. Even if someone to violate Shvius prohibitions, to use even side again the Rashidil, you have 5 lines from the top in the right column. Afila ben achoshu, that's what Ravimi understood. You're not allowed to do it. You're being machzik the yoyver aveino. So that his havamina was the shemen of milsa d'lishchicha. It's not common for people to make perfume. It's not common. And let me word it in the opposite direction also. When people make perfume, a little bit of perfume can last for a very long time. Mamish. Real perfume, the oil perfume. So even though if this guy would have no perfume from the 6th year, we know he makes it on the 7th year, but that's not so likely. There's a greater likelihood that he made perfume on the 5th year and it's good for the next 5 years. It's a big chachma to make perfume. That's the way they do it. They make quantities and it lasts for a tremendous amount of time. I'm not talking about the perfumes that people buy today in the stores that are, even if it's not synthetic, there's alcohol in it, and at some point it turns. The oil lasts. In the Holy Temple Institute, I think they found like old Shaman Amishchas, they found stuff from the 2,000 years ago. And it's good. Okay. However, the Gemara is going to say that Ravimi's understanding of the Braisa was too extreme. Amalei Rabbi Yosei, no. Lo yamru, the Braisa is lenient, but lo yamru ela b'she'eno yodeya im chashud emeinu chashud. What the Braisa says that likeach mikol makayim, it means you don't. He doesn't need to have a hashgacha. You don't have to know whether he's chashud or not. So it's almost, I would say, it's like a svek sveka. First of all, he might not be chashud. Even if he's chashud, let's go with what the Rashirilio says. Chashud means he's suspect. We know that he would make it if he would have run out of perfume. He will make it on the 7th year. But you don't know if he did that. That's when you can buy it. But if we know that this is a person that violates this rule, he manufactures perfume with oil of the 7th year, even though you don't know for sure if the oil that you're buying is from there, that's already usher. No, machlekes amoyroim Ravimi Rabbi Yosi, how lenient are we? Now, we are inferring from the Braisa, the fact that the Braisa explicitly says that you're not allowed to perfume shvius oil. The Braisa made no such mention of wine, and the problem is that when the Mishnah, not a Braisa, when the Mishnah deals with the same isurim when it comes to trumas u'maisres, meaning if you have truma oil, if you have maiser sheni oil, and the Mishnah says that the same thing, you're not allowed to perfume it because you're wasting it, same logic. But the Mishnah there explicitly says that you are allowed to spice truma and maiser sheni wine, and let me explain to you why. Because when the oil that gets reabsorbed, not the oil, the wine that gets reabsorbed in whatever it is you are using to spice the wine, those spices are eaten. It's not thrown out. That's the way it works. It's amazing. And even if there's a second reason, Danny, that the herbs somehow ruin the taste, no, people spice wine because they want that taste in the wine. In either direction, there is absolutely no waste when you do the same procedure with wine. And that's why the Mishnah in Truma and Maiser Sheni, they write both in them, that you can't use Truma or Maiser Sheni oil for perfume. You can't perfume it, but you can use wine of Truma and Maiser Sheni, and you can spice it. Now, the Mishnah says it in both directions. Our Braisa only shares the prohibited side of Ein Mefatmin Shaman Shel Shvius. So the fact that the Braisa doesn't say what about wine, so the Gemara wants to know, Ma'u Lefatim Yain Shel Shvius. Now, why would it be usher? That's the question. If the Mishnah writes explicitly in Maiser Sheni and in Trumais that you are allowed to spice Truma wine because there's no laws, why would Shvius be different? So there is a logic, because one might have argued that even though you don't ruin the wine, less people drink such wine. Not everyone enjoys spiced wine. It's a niche. The people that like it will pay more money for it. But there is a certain, again, kamos, not echos. The quality is better, but not everyone likes it. It's like smoking whiskey. You understand? You put more work into it. You can even charge more money for it, but some people won't like that. So maybe, and so there's the logic to be machmer. The Braisa doesn't say anything. So the Gemara clarifies, Nashme'ina men ado. I will know the answer, inferring it from our Mishnah. The Mishnah writes at the end, Kal mehen shvi'is shenitna lalokas haner. The Mishnah, our Mishnah juxtaposes shvi'is and Truma and Maiser Sheni. And then the Mishnah says that Shvi'is is more lenient, even more lenient, because you are allowed to use the oil of Shvi'is for kindling a candle. You are allowed to use it for that purpose. You're not allowed to use Truma Tohira. The Gemara will clarify. For kindling a candle, can't use Maiser Sheni outside Yerushalmi for kindling a candle. You're not using it. It has to be, maybe even in Yerushalmi, you have to use it for eating, drinking, and sicha, period. Okay, so what's that ayah? From here, I infer that you are allowed to spice shvi'is wine. How is it inferred? Look inside the Manafulda, 5 lines from the top, second narrow line. Now, what's that ayah? And if you would think that shvi'is, for some reason, is more chamur, like we mentioned, because by shvi'is, if you were to spice shvi'is wine, you reduce the potential number of drinkers. Let's go. Some people don't enjoy it. And again, why are we thinking that? Because why wouldn't the Braisa say it's mutter? by Truma we say Shemen Asur, Yayin Mutter. Here we said Shemen Asur, it didn't say Yayin is Mutter. So therefore, there's a Havamina to think the Braisa doesn't say it because wine is not Mutter. But if that would be the case, if you would think that Asur Lefatim, our Mishnah should have said, now that our Mishnah, after juxtaposing Shvius and Truma, the Mishnah tells you where they're different. The Mishnah is telling you where one is more lenient than the other. If it would have been Asur, just like the Mishnah says, that Shvius is more lenient than Trumos and Meiser Sheni. Trumos or Meiser Sheni, you cannot use its oil, lahadlokas haner. By Shvius, it's kal. Once you're giving me which one is more kal than the other, you should have gone in this direction. That Trumos or Meiser Sheni is kal, that you can spice the wine of Trumos and Meiser Sheni. If the din would be that Shvius is Asur, Shvius is Asur. Hada Amra, that there is no differentiation. Our Mishnah writes the only difference is when it comes to Hadlakas Haner. That's a great infer that I am. Problem is, after the whole speech, you want to know the din, whether you are allowed to be mefatim yayin of shviz. So we're concluding an inference that it's muter. Some of these Amirayim, they found the Braisa that explicitly writes, says the Gemara, v'hotani yasser. You're not allowed to spice shviz wine. And Hanami. The inference from our Mishnah is correct. Our Mishnah will hold that it's muter. There's a Braisa that says it's asur, and now I know that it's a machlokes kanoim, and I even know who says what. Amar Rabbi Lazar says, Amar Rabbi Lazar Gavaldik, that the Rabbi Yehuda, that's going back to our Mishnah. The Rabbi Yehuda matir mepnei shu mashbichai Gavaldik, and really we find that.
How do you learn Ashvacha? It's
wait. Just let me just speak out. I know we're missing information. That in Meiser Sheni, look inside the Maraful, the middle of the Amid, which Rabbi Yehuda is time to know that the Perek Achad Esrei in the first Mishnah in Mesechta Trumais, a Mishnah. What's the Mishnah there speaking about? A new topic. Can you add wine in your tafshil? Wine of Truma. Ein mevashlin yayin shel Truma. We're speaking about a kohen. Not allowed to do it, because when you add wine in a pot, some of it evaporates. So you're ruining it. You're making it be lost. Rabbi Yehuda says, matir. Why? Because even though you're losing some of the kamus, you are upgrading the echos of the food. So mamish kamus echos. So the underlying logic between the machlokes Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, whether you can add wine in a tafshil, wine of truma in a tafshil, the same will be over here. Same logic will be over here. When you spice wine, your mashbiach, it's kamus. Your mashbiach, it's kamus. But fewer people will drink it. It's not exactly the same. There it gets evaporated. And my machlokes, the inference that you made is correct. The Braisa that says Asur is correct. Asur goes according to the Chachamim that you may not add it to a tafshil. And our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda, just like you are allowed to add it to a tafshil, you are allowed to spice it. Even though lesser people will eat it, it's still going to be mutter because you upgraded the tam of the wine. What are you saying, Yakir?
Nothing, it's good.
Okay. And now let's unpackage the last line in the Mishnah. That Kalman Shvius, that Shvius, now that when the Mishnah speaks about how Trumas are different than Shvius, Trumas Meiser Sheni different than Shvius, Kalman Shvius, Shenitna lahadlok asner. Problem is, what are you talking about? We constantly use Truma oil for fuel. Utruma loinitna lahadlok ashaner. The Gemara says absolutely not. Whenever we speak about using Truma for fuel, it's only because the Truma is Tameh. Right, Shemen Sreifa. Truma Tameya Nitna Lavak. I mean, we learned about this somehow so many times. For us, we know this. Shvius, that's the Chiddush. Afilu Tohaida, also Nitna Lavak. That's where Shvius is more lenient. Now, even though our topic is not directly Kedusha Shvius, our topic is but why is it that you may not be mafsid shvi'is? Because it's holy. Now we're going to learn a Gavaldik application of holiness. Says the Gemara story. Now, before the story, just to remind ourselves that the typical bathhouses that they had in the times of Chazal was comprised of 3 chambers. And where did we learn this? We learned this in brachas. We learned this regarding in which chamber can you make a bracha. So the outer chambers where people walked in. In the middle chamber, people were already half undressed. In the innermost chamber, people were all ungarbed. And because of that, I mean, that was the context over there that you can't say Dvaram Shev Kedusha in front of an erva. Okay, so now, me'inyan le'inyan. Rab Chizkiya, all mischei, he went into the bathhouse. And Yahav Tzil Loichisa Lis Soisimi. Soisimi was the name of the bathhouse attendant. So he gave, when you came to the bathhouse, if you needed stuff, someone helped you with it. He gave his oil, it happened to be Shvius oil, to Soisimi, who is Udiyasa, who is the attendant. And Amalei and Abchizkiya tells this Susimi that A'aleili le'anusha. Bring it to me to the anusha. Now, the anusha is the innermost room in the bathhouse. In other words, when you go into the bath, you can't hold anything. You're not wearing garments there. You understand? If you have a half a garment, put it in your pocket. Whatever you need in the innermost room, you need someone to bring it to you. Today, when we go to the innermost rooms and these spas, they have whatever you need over there. It's much wealthier now. You have all of the creams in there. You have all of the shampoos in there. When you're going into a bathhouse that you bring your own stuff, bring your own towel. So he told them, I'm going to go bathe. They used to put oil after they bathed. He says, here, hold on to it and bring it to me and le'anusha. Problem is, so this is the great Rab Chizkiya. Imagine, the Amoira. And here we're speaking about a bathhouse attendant. The bathhouse attendant knew a din. Amalei, so Susimi tells him, no. Leis, asur, this is Belashon Bitmiya, Marafulda. Is it not asur? It's amazing. Why would it be asur? Because there's kedusha in the oil. Can you imagine? And you can't bring something holy into a place where you can't make a bracha. You know where we find something similar, my friends, Bachlal? We are careful not to bring food into a bathroom. Here it's not food. See here there's no consumption of it. But here he's anointing. And anointing is consumption. Anointing, sicha keshasiya. It's gavaldik. And it's, his whole story is beautiful. So you have a Pashat bathhouse attendant, Daf Samach Gimel on the top. And Abchizkiya, with his humility, says, it made sense. He never thought about that. So Asar, he came, Shaul Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amalei, look at the Girsa. Amalei, it doesn't say what Amalei. So we have over here, Tava the Amalei, it doesn't say in our Girsa what he told him. So look inside the top Marafulda. He told him what the Gemara is going to write in a moment. Whoever put together the Yerushalmi didn't need all these words. We're skipping words. Similarly, and then also Amalei Rab Chizkiya came back to this Sosimi, and he told him Limadetanu. Limadetanu means thank you. Indeed, you taught me. You taught me. I'll share something interesting. What happened to me yesterday. Someone here in the Chabad Solar community is opening up a business connected to health, and they made as their logo a snake, a sign of a snake on the stick. Until yesterday, I knew that's I think Parshas Chukas, right? Or that's a symbol of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the story, right? And even though Chizkiyahu HaMelech, he pulverized it, v'hoiduloi, right, from the 3 things that he did in Psachim, 3 things, loi hoiduloi, 3 things hoiduloi, but nevertheless, it's a biblical symbol. So someone asked me about the symbol, and I said, yeah, I think it's a Gevaldik, it's from the Torah. And then she sends me an article from Chabad.org, quoting Rab Leibel Bistritsky of blessed memory, that it's a I don't know what year, I think in the 80s, when in Crown Heights they had their Hatzalah van, and they put on the Hatzalah van, like in many ambulances, this sign. So the Rebbe said that you're not allowed to do that. You should take it off. Why? The Rebbe says that it's from Greek. Avodah Zarah. I never knew that.
Mythology, right?
It's a Greek symbol. Like I was surprised because even if it's a Greek symbol, it's a Torah symbol, and not to use it. Mamish that exactly. Oh, and what the funny thing is that I'm not going to mention his name because I have the biggest respect. I spoke to a big Rav who told me it's mutter, and we both learned something new yesterday. We didn't know that if that article is true, that the Rebbe said not to use it, then you're not allowed to use it. I'm not comparing this with anything. I'm just saying that the story is gavaldik, that you have to listen. When someone tells you something, Rabbi Chizkiah could have had the attitude, who are you, a bathhouse attendant? No. He asked and he found out, and Vitani came, that ein sachen shemen shel shvius b'merchatz. Mamish, you cannot use Sheva because it's holy.
But it's so strange, the Chela Refua, in the Israeli army, they're also using it as a symbol. Well, you want to tell me that all of Rabbanim and Nudniks here in Israel want to make a storm?
No, don't make any shturim. I'm just saying, don't forget, Yakir, that it is a biblical simon. It's a biblical simon. I know it from the Torah. Since I'm a kid, I always look at an ambulance and say, "Aha, you see, that's the Nachash and Choishes." The Mishnah says it's V'chi Nachash Ma'amemis, V'chi Nachash Ma'chayim. You have to look up to God. It's a beautiful thing. Evidently, Goyim Oiv de Avodah Zarah have this as a simon. This can be something of the Rebbe. This can be Lifnim Mishuras Hadin. I don't know. Since this
Hermes, god of it's the Greek god. It's the Greek god Hermes.
Since it's a Greek god.
No. You're actually mixing them up. There's two different ones.
There's two different ones, right?
The point about who cares which god? Same thing.
There's one with one snake and one with two snakes.
Achilik. My point is, Yakir, is that I don't think that's a halacha. Something is in the Chumash. This is what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said to take it down because it's used. It was stolen. Let's say.
Where did the Rebbe say that?
So the source I'll send out. It's orally. If it's correct, I told him if it's correct. If the Rebbe said not to you, don't use it.
It is interesting because if they stole it from us,
that's right. That's right. I would still say that the Rebbe was I know this. I heard from Rabbi Leib that the red band the Rebbe said not to wear. Darkei Amoiri. Darkei Amoiri. The Amorites did it for healing. In other words, it could be this is beyond the letter of the law. That if you have to be very careful not to do anything, there's a limit to that. Like the Gemara says, the Goyim serve the sun as an avodah zarah. What that means, I can't benefit from the sun. It's not chal, right? I know I'm comparing apples and oranges. That's something that's Oisa b'dei shamayim. The Mishnah gives the rules, and there's no Maaseh yedei Adam. You have the rules for that. Anyways, coming back over here. Here's the thing. So what happens if I have oil on my body, Keva? You're telling me that because of the Kedusha of Shvius, I can't go into the innermost chamber of the bathhouse where people are undressed. So what happens if I put oil on my body? What, am I not allowed to enter the bathhouse? That you could do. We don't, in other words, it's a chumrah. We don't go at kedei kach. It's gavaldik. And now that we learned this braisa that they found all to substantiate this Sosimi's statement, v'loi madlik in shemen sreifa. Another interesting halacha. You have shemen sreifa. We said that truma oil that is tamei actually has to be burned. It can't be eaten, and you can benefit from the fuel, but don't use it. Loi bebate knesiyos, v'loi bebate midrashos. Psanai Zajac mepnei bizoyin kachim. What's the bizoyin kachim? You have to burn it anyways. So the Rash Shirilio understands. We'll finish with that. 4 lines from the top. Nidol Afarish, what's the problem? Someone made a neder. Someone says, I am donating oil to the Beis HaMedrash, Beis HaKnesses. The neder or b'nedava. That was his promise. To fulfill your vow, you can't use truma. Asur lahadlik b'shemen sreifa. Why? Even though shemen tamei, Truma Tmeya has to be burnt because the Mechse Kiporei Choyve Betruma, it looks like you're paying down your debt using Truma. The Asur, and why is that Asur? That's the Bizoyin Kachim. Kederech Sha'asur Lefroye Choyve Mishvis. Wow. Behind the Bizoyin Kachim. So it's another application of where we take the Kedusha beyond to where you can imagine. We'll stop over here, Chavre. God willing, Halacha Gimel in the next year.